The sun, a relentless painter, had etched deep lines into Ryno Botha's face, mapping a lifetime of struggle against the arid northern Cape Earth. His hands, gnarled and scarred from decades of working the unforgiving land, gripped the steering wheel as his battered backy crunched over the gravel track leading to the Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary gates. He was in his late 50s, a man who rarely showed emotion, but today, his heart hammered with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. 3 years. 3 years since he had last seen Tao, the lion cub he'd pulled back from the very edge of death. The memory of that tiny, helpless creature, no bigger than his forearm, still clawed at his conscience, a constant, silent echo in his thoughts. His mind drifted back 4 years, to a moment that had shattered the monotony of his solitary life. Dr. Lena Moraes, the sanctuary's seasoned director, a woman in her early 40s known for her calm authority, had taken his call. Her initial skepticism had been palpable, a polite disbelief masking professional alarm. Ryno had relayed an impossible find, a story so outlandish it sounded like the ramblings of a sun-crazed hermit. He'd found it beneath an abandoned concrete water tank on his remote farm, a structure left to decay decades ago, a whisper of life, barely breathing, no more than 2 weeks old. A lion cub. There was no mother de Moraes, no other lions for hundreds of miles. He was dying. The words had left him raw then, and they still did. The desolation of his farm was absolute. No place for a cub so young, so utterly vulnerable. The cub had been hypothermic, malnourished, its tiny ribs visible beneath a sparse, dusty coat. The 3-hour drive to Thornfield had been an agonizing race against time. Ryno, a man of practical solutions, found himself helpless, one hand constantly pressed against the cub's frail chest, feeling the erratic flutter of its heartbeat. He'd driven with a desperation that defied all logic, a farmer reduced to a plea, a silent prayer. Dr. Moraes' initial assessment had been grim. Lion cubs don't survive without their mothers at this age, Ryno. The odds are non-existent. Her voice, though compassionate, was firm, grounded in years of experience with nature's brutal realities. But Ryno refused to leave. "I can't," he'd insisted, the words torn from a place deep within him. Something about him. "Let me stay. I'll help with everything." It was a plea, a demand that flew in the face of standard sanctuary protocol. But Lena, witnessing the fierce, unwavering compassion in this hardened farmer's eyes, saw a flicker of hope. She made a risky exception. "All right, Ryno, but this is unprecedented. You understand the risks." As he spoke to Lena then, a chilling detail resurfaced, one he'd buried under the immediate crisis. Around the abandoned water tank, there had been an unnatural silence, a profound lack of other wildlife. No insects hummed, no birds chirped, and a strange metallic smell had hung in the air, faint but distinct. "It felt wrong," Ryno had muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Like nothing should have been there, yet he was. A shiver, colder than any desert night, traced his spine. The weeks that followed were a grueling battle for life. Round-the-clock care, specialized formula, constant monitoring. Ryno poured every ounce of his being into the cub, naming him Tao after the powerful lion symbol, a defiant gesture against the cub's impossible origins. Dr. Moraes, despite her initial skepticism, began to observe Tao's unusual resilience to illness, an almost unnatural robustness that defied his fragile start. Then, on day 18, a small miracle. Tao lifted his head, his nascent eyes locking onto Ryno's, a gaze of deep, ancient recognition. In that moment, an unshakable, almost telepathic connection formed, a bond that transcended species, defying all rational explanation. But as Tao continued to thrive, growing at an astonishing rate, Dr. Moraes' meticulous logs began to show worrying discrepancies. Unusual growth patterns, behavioral resilience that defied scientific norms. The data simply didn't add up. Ryno's initial relief had slowly curdled into a nagging unease. Why was Tao alone? And why had that patch of earth where he'd been found been so unnervingly silent, so devoid of life, imbued with that strange metallic scent? The questions lingered, dark and unsettling, beneath the surface of his gratitude. As weeks bled into months, Tao grew stronger, his tiny, fragile body transforming into a robust, agile form. His bond with Ryno became extraordinary, a silent, profound understanding that transcended words. He knew me, Lena, Ryno had insisted to Dr. Moraes, even before his eyes fully opened. He'd come only for my voice, my touch. Ryno spent hours daily within the enclosure, defying every established rehabilitation protocol. He played with Tao, teaching him to stalk, to pounce, to wrestle with a gentle ferocity, helping him develop the raw strength he would need. Dr. Moraes, observing from a distance, meticulously documented every interaction. Her initial scientific skepticism had morphed into a conflicted fascination. "This is unprecedented," she noted in her logs, her pen scratching against paper. "His social development is exceptional, but it hinges entirely on Ryno." Tao displayed remarkable confidence and intelligence, learning at an accelerated rate that astonished the sanctuary staff. His amber eyes, deepening with age, seemed to hold a deeper understanding, a knowing gaze that felt uncanny in a creature so young. Ryno's intuitive understanding of Tao's needs wasn't just caregiving, it was an emotional security that fostered this unusual development, a constant presence that seemed to fuel Tao's every leap forward. By 6 months, Tao was a magnificent young lion, his muscular frame rippling beneath a golden coat, strong enough for a larger enclosure. But with this growth came the inevitable, the ethical wall. The difficult, heartbreaking phase of reducing human contact began. Ryno understood, intellectually, the heartbreaking necessity of this separation. For Tao to be truly wild, to eventually be released, he couldn't remain dependent on a human. Emotionally, however, it was devastating. Tao sensed the shift. He began to pace the fence, his roar still immature but filled with a raw, heart-wrenching desperation, calling for Ryno. Ryno, standing just out of sight, fought the instinct to comfort him, his own heart tearing with every mournful sound. Marae, despite her empathy for both Ryno and Tao, had to enforce protocol. "He needs to adapt, Ryno," she explained, her voice soft but firm, "to be truly wild." She had no choice but to limit Ryno's visits. It was during this painful period of transition that Dr. Moraes began to notice a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Tao's behavior. Whenever a particular sanctuary vehicle, a dark green Land Cruiser not usually assigned to his section, passed by his enclosure, Tao would grow unusually quiet, his eyes tracking its movement with an intense, almost fearful focus, before returning to his agitated pacing. It was a brief, odd deviation, one that tugged at her scientific curiosity. Over the next year, Ryno's visits became less frequent, then stopped entirely. He buried himself in the unforgiving routine of farm work, his days filled with manual labor, his nights with the phantom echo of a cub's cry. Heartbroken, but resolute, he focused on the greater good. Meanwhile, Dr. Marae, reviewing her research notes on Tao's anomalous development, noticed something unsettling. Some of her meticulously logged observations, particularly those detailing Tao's unusual intelligence and resistance to illness, seemed to have been misplaced or even subtly edited in the digital archive. A chill unrelated to the air conditioning crept down her spine. She confided in a trusted colleague, a quiet discussion about Tao's extraordinary intelligence and the odd circumstances of his discovery, voicing a growing unease that she couldn't quite articulate. The memory of that metallic smell from the water tank, the unnatural silence of his discovery site, continued to nag at Ryno. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Tao's origin than simple abandonment, something lurking beneath the surface of that impossible find. Was Tao's resilience a natural miracle, a testament to his indomitable spirit, or was there an underlying factor, something yet undiscovered, that influenced his extraordinary development, something far more sinister at play? The question gnawed at him, a festering wound in his otherwise pragmatic mind. For 3 years, Ryno Botha lived a solitary life on his farm, the void left by Tao's absence a constant dull ache. The flatted, empty landscape mirrored the quiet expanse in his own heart. He followed Tao's progress from a distance, through the occasional reports Dr. Murray sent, celebrating each milestone with a private, wistful pride. Tao had been successfully released into the expansive Mataquay Game Reserve, joining a coalition of males, asserting his dominance, establishing his own territory. He was a magnificent, wild king, exactly as he was meant to be. Then, the unexpected call. The old rotary phone on Ryno's dusty kitchen table shrilled, startling him. Dr. Morea's voice, usually so composed, was excited, breathless. "Ryno, it's Tao. He's back at the sanctuary." The words hit Ryno like a physical blow. Tao had been recaptured for a vital genetic diversity relocation to Botswana. He would be at the sanctuary for 2 weeks, undergoing final health checks. Ryno's hands trembled as he hung up, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within him. 3 years. He was about to see Tao again, but a cold, sharp fear pierced through the hope. Would Tao remember him? The sanctuary staff, in their well-meaning professionalism, offered their warnings, their voices cautious. "He's a fully wild predator now, Ryno. Over 400 pounds of muscle and instinct. Dangerous, not the cub you knew." Each word was a sensible, stark reminder of the chasm that had grown between them. Ryno drove to the sanctuary under a sky the color of old brass, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and stark terror. What would he find at the end of this journey? What would be left of the bond he so cherished? Dr. Moraes had anticipated the profound significance of this reunion. The area around Tao's temporary enclosure had been deliberately cleared of visitors and non-essential staff. The air hushed, almost reverent. As they approached, Ryno's eyes strained against the shifting shadows beneath the sparse acacia trees. A flicker of golden fur, then the unmistakable massive outline of a lion. "Transport went smoothly," Dalmareas confirmed, her voice low. "Clean bill of health. He's in prime condition." Her words were meant to be reassuring, but Ryno's throat tightened. He caught a glimpse of Tao, a flash of powerful shoulder, a swish of tail, realizing just how much he'd grown, how completely he had transformed from the helpless creature he'd once cradled. They reached the perimeter fence of the boma. Ryno stopped, his gaze sweeping the enclosure. Tao, a majestic male now, emerged from the deeper shadows, his muscular frame rippling with controlled power. His amber eyes, burning with an ancient intensity, swept the area, then fixed on Ryno. There was no immediate recognition, only the primal assessment of a wild predator. Tao began to move, a slow, deliberate stalk along the fence line, his eyes never leaving Ryno. He was assessing, evaluating, a wild animal examining a potential threat, a new variable in his temporary domain. De Moraes tensed beside Ryno, her hand instinctively going to the radio clipped to her belt, ready for intervention if the situation escalated. The air crackled with palpable tension, thick and suffocating. Yet, as Ryno watched, a desperate hope ignited within him. He observed subtle movements, familiar rhythms in Tao's powerful stride, a distinctive tilt of his massive head as he circled. These were not just the generic movements of any lion. They were specific, imprinted mannerisms, echoes of the cub he'd raised, sparking a desperate, fragile hope that somewhere beneath the wild exterior, a memory lingered. Ryno's voice, a raw whisper, broke the silence. "Hello, Tao. It's me, boy. It's Ryno." His own name felt foreign, caught in a throat tight with emotion. Tao's ears twitched, barely perceptible, but his colossal form remained poised, his amber gaze still fixed on Ryno, with an unnerving, predator-like assessment. Yet something shifted, a minuscule relaxation around his powerful jaw, an almost imperceptible softening in the depth of his eyes. Ignoring Dr. Moraes' sharp intake of breath beside him, Ryno pressed closer to the fence, his desperation overriding any fear. "I know you remember, Tao," he pleaded, his voice thick. "I raised you." Tao, in a breathtaking display of raw power and unnerving grace, moved. He stopped directly in front of Ryno, the fence now the only barrier between them. Inches separated them, and Tao's immense size was overwhelming, a golden-maned giant towering over Ryno. His nostrils flared, taking in Ryno's scent, an ancient, instinctual process. His massive head tilted, a gesture Ryno knew so well, and the predatory look in his eyes softened, replaced by something deeper, something familiar. "That's right," Ryno breathed, tears stinging his eyes. "You do remember, don't you? The nights, the games." The words tumbled out, fragments of shared history. Then, from the pocket of his worn trousers, Ryno pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden whistle, pitted and smooth from years of handling. He raised it to his lips and blew a gentle, wobbling note, a simple melody he'd used to call the cub during playtime. The effect was instantaneous, profound. Tao stiffened, his eyes widening, the amber depths reflecting a sudden clear light of recognition. He stepped closer, pressing his huge body against the barrier, his fur brushing the wire mesh. A low rumble began in his chest, deep and resonant. A purr, growing in intensity, vibrating through the ground. Overwhelmed, Ryno reached towards the fence, his fingers trembling, wanting desperately to touch the powerful animal. Tao stretched his neck, bringing his magnificent head close, his massive jowls inches from Ryno's outstretched hand. "My God," Dr. Moraes whispered, tears in her own eyes, her scientific composure momentarily shattered. "I've never seen anything like this." He remembers. Ryno blew the specific notes he used for feeding time, a series of short, sharp bursts. Tao responded immediately, beginning to pace the enclosure. Not with agitation, but with a clear, almost playful anticipation, his tail swishing. Then the impossible happened. Tao lowered himself to the ground, slowly, deliberately, and rolled onto his back, exposing his vulnerable belly, a gesture of absolute, unequivocal trust. "Impossible," Dr. Moraes breathed, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Adult male lions don't do this. Not to a human. Not ever." Against every protocol, against every instinct of self-preservation, Ryno extended his hand through the fence. Tao's enormous paw, claws retracted, gently touched Ryno's weathered palm through the mesh, a moment of profound connection that defied logic and danger. As their hands touched, a faint, almost imperceptible scent wafted from Tao's fur. Metallic, distinctly unnatural. It was the same strange odor Ryno had smelled near the water tank where he'd found the cub, too subtle to be natural, too specific to be ignored. A prickle of unease, cold and sharp, traced Ryno's spine, momentarily eclipsing the warmth of the reunion. Tao chuffed softly, his intelligent eyes never leaving Ryno's, a deep, knowing gaze. As Ryno registered the strange scent, there seemed to be more than just remembrance in Tao's expression. A hint of concern, an unspoken message passing between them, an almost desperate plea in the lion's knowing gaze. If you're as gripped as I am by Ryno's impossible reunion with the Tao, then brace yourselves. What happened next takes this story to a truly shocking turn, revealing a conspiracy whose life-threatening danger could reshape everything we thought we knew about the wild. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a single beat of this unfolding mystery. The reunion between Ryno and Tao stretched for over an hour, a timeless space where the Wild King relearned the language of his first protector. Ryno recounted old stories, whispered memories of feeding times and clumsy playtime, and Tao responded with soft chirping and low mewing sounds, the very vocalizations he'd made as a tiny cub. It was an ethereal connection, a bridge across the years in the wild. Dr. Moraes stood nearby, a silent observer, her scientific mind reeling. "This challenges fundamental assumptions about predator psychology," she murmured, almost to herself, "about memory retention, the very nature of imprinting." She pulled out her outbook, determined to document every nuance, every impossible detail. Ryno, however, was fixated on something else entirely. The faint metallic scent he'd noticed on Tao's fur earlier was stronger now, particularly around his massive neck and flank. It wasn't the smell of dirt or a natural animal odor. It was chemical, cold and artificial, a stark anomaly on the magnificent beast. As the light began to fade, Ryno knew he had to leave. But as he stirred, Tao became visibly distressed, his powerful body pressed closer to the fence, his purring taking on a desperate, agitated quality. He nudged the wire mesh with his nose, repeatedly pushing towards a specific, overgrown section of the perimeter fence, just beyond the main enclosure. Then, with an intelligence that stole Ryno's breath, Tao repeatedly tapped his enormous paw on the ground in that direction, looking back at Ryno with an intense, almost pleading expression. His amber eyes, usually so regal, conveyed an undeniable urgency. Ryno followed Tao's gaze. Beyond the fence in the undergrowth of the game reserve itself, he noticed a subtle shimmer on some leaves, a sickly, unnatural discoloration of the plants, barely visible in the dimming light. A powerful pull twisted in Ryno's gut. Tao was clearly trying to communicate something beyond mere affection, something urgent and critical. His moral conviction, his deep-seated need to protect this creature he considered his own, collided violently with the sanctuary's strict protocols, the rules designed to keep humans separate from the wild. He tried to point it out to Dr. Moraes. "Did you notice?" he began, gesturing vaguely. She glanced at the area, then dismissed it with a wave of her hand, her scientific mind categorizing it as ordinary. "Wild animal behavior, Ryno, or maybe just some environmental anomaly. It's a game reserve boundary after all, nothing out of the ordinary." Her words, meant to reassure, only fueled Ryno's deepening suspicion. He recalled the unnerving silence around Tao's discovery site, the same unnatural metallic smell. This was too much of a coincidence. He instinctively knew this wasn't an environmental anomaly. He suspected a human-related danger, something insidious that Tao, with his heightened senses and extraordinary intelligence, intuitively knew. Investigating meant breaking serious sanctuary and reserve rules, potentially jeopardizing his own freedom, and even worse, Tao's safety and future. But Tao nudged the fence against Ryno's hand, his purr deep but agitated, an unmistakable expression of gratitude mixed with fear. He was asking for help. In that moment, Ryno made an agonizing, silent promise. He must investigate. His heart ached, knowing this desperate decision could plunge him into unforeseen danger, not just for himself, but for Tao's precarious future. He decided he would use the remaining time Tao was at the sanctuary to gather more clues, to observe, and then he would secretly return to the reserve to follow Tao's silent warning. "I won't let you down, boy," Ryno whispered, pressing his forehead against the fence, a new, chilling determination hardening his gaze. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Ryno sensed a larger, hidden threat at play, one that predated Tao's miraculous rescue and now threatened his continued existence, a shadow looming over them both. Days later, after Tao had been safely relocated to Botswana, Ryno returned covertly to the Madikwe Game Reserve. The fear he carried was a cold, heavy stone in his gut, but it was eclipsed by a powerful sense of dread and a hidden camera clutched in his weathered hand. He navigated the dense bush, not by maps or trails, but by an unsettling instinct, drawn to the exact, overgrown section of the fence Tao had indicated, near the old sanctuary boundary. Deep within the tangled undergrowth, Ryno made his first chilling discovery, a series of camouflaged, almost invisible, ground snares. They weren't designed for killing or crude poaching. These were built to capture without injury, meticulously crafted with strange biosensors attached. The metallic scent, that artificial, chemical odor, was overwhelmingly strong here, clinging to the damp earth. Further exploration revealed a discarded drone battery pack, marked with peculiar, stylized corporate logos, and an unsettling, perfectly circular patch of dead vegetation, unlike any natural blight caused by drought or disease. The trail led him deeper to a small, clandestine research outpost, cunningly disguised as an abandoned ranger station. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of light, illuminating old logs and discarded equipment. What Ryno found confirmed his worst fears. Records detailing unethical biomarker tagging, advanced genetic monitoring data, and chilling mentions of Project Chimera, focusing on enhanced resilience in apex predators. The truth about Tao's origins slammed into Ryno with the force of a physical blow. Tao wasn't simply abandoned. He was a target of a failed retrieval operation from this very project, his unique resilience a result of experimentation, not a natural miracle. He had been left for dead, deemed a failure by these cold, calculating minds. The documents hinted at a powerful, shadowy corporation funding this illegal research, using protected reserves across Africa as their testing grounds. A network of sanctuary liaisons subtly influenced protocols, ensuring their secrets remain safe. Dr. Moraes' misplaced notes, her edited digital logs, suddenly made terrifying sense. She had been compromised, her data manipulated. Footsteps, voices, Ryno froze, pressing himself into the deepest shadows. A shadowy figure, a man in a corporate-branded utility suit, entered the outpost, flanked by two armed guards. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, discussing the latest subject retrieval, a chilling confirmation that other wild animals were being targeted. Ryno faced an agonizing decision: expose himself and the evidence, risking his life against armed men, or retreat and let this horrifying conspiracy continue. He remembered Tao's pleading eyes, the desperate nudge towards this very spot, his promise. Fueled by his profound love for Tao and a surging outrage at this betrayal of nature, Ryno stepped out from the shadows, his hidden camera silently recording. "What you're doing here," he declared, his voice trembling but firm. "It's a crime." The lead corporate agent turned, his expression initially startled, then slowly morphing into a sneer of recognition. "The farmer who found subject Tao 007, he drawled, a cruel amusement in his voice. "How quaint. We allowed you to bond with him, an unwitting control variable for our experiment on human-animal bonds and accelerated development. A successful, if unexpected, outcome." He revealed a vast network of such hidden sites, manipulating wildlife across Africa, driven by corporate greed for bioengineered solutions and conservation breakthroughs. A tense standoff ensued. Ryno, though outmatched and unarmed, stood firm, clutching his camera. The truth, heavy and undeniable, was now in his hands. He wasn't just fighting for Tao, he was fighting for the very soul of the wild. Just as the guards moved in, a distant, powerful roar echoed through the reserve. Tao's roar, a chilling, primal warning that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth, an unseen ally against the human forces. Ryno used the momentary distraction, bolting into the dense bush, making his escape with the evidence that would change everything. His life would never be the same. The bond with Tao had not only saved a life, but exposed a dark truth threatening the very essence of the wild Ryno Botha's journey, beginning with a trembling heart outside the Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary, ended not with a simple reunion, but with the exposure of a truth that shatters every assumption about human-animal bonds and conservation. 3 years after rescuing Tao, a lion cub of impossible origins, Ryno's unwavering compassion forged an unbreakable connection that defied scientific understanding. This unprecedented bond proved crucial. Tao, now a magnificent wild king, remembered his rescuer and in a silent, desperate plea, guided Ryno to a clandestine outpost within the Madakway Game Reserve. There, Ryno uncovered Project Chimera, a corporate-funded, unethical genetic manipulation program. Tao wasn't a miracle, he was an experimental subject, his extraordinary resilience a result of bioengineering. Ryno, an unwitting control variable, confronted the conspirators, exposing a vast network manipulating Africa's wildlife. This harrowing tale, which I've documented, transcends ordinary rehabilitation. It's a testament to an extraordinary animal intelligence and an unbreakable bond that didn't just save a life, but ripped open a dark secret threatening the very essence of the wild. It reminds us why conservation matters, now more than ever, in Words 200.